Hi, I'm Peggy Farron, and this is the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Welcome to episode number 54. Remember, we have this on Facebook, on our Facebook group, facebook.com/understandphotography, as well as our YouTube channel, and it's also a podcast on iTunes. So just do a search under the Understand Photography Show. The next class for the 4 weeks to proficiency in photography begins October 5th. So if you want to get a good foundation in photography, it's a great class. It's a series of 4 videos. You have a live teacher, so you watch the video, you ask questions, I'm there to support you, you turn in your homework. People get a lot out of it because of the format of the class. And also, our motto at Understand Photography is we simplify the technical. One of the recent students who just signed up said, okay, well, I'm going to learn about photography. Well, how do I learn about my specific camera? And I said, this class will help you with that as well. Because we don't just say, oh, your aperture does this or that or the other thing. We say, your aperture does this, and also here's how to change it on your camera. So you're going to love the class. My guest today is Joe Fitzpatrick. Joe has been a guest many times. He's a producer of the show. He's also the president of the Florida Camera Club Council, which is the statewide group, or what would you call it, Joe, the umbrella?
It's an umbrella group of all the camera clubs.
In Florida.
Yeah.
And he's also the lead instructor here at Understand Photography. We are recording this episode because I am taking another European trip. You wouldn't believe my life. I mean, I'm not complaining. But I did a house swap, and I was a month in Italy. I came home late August 31st. I worked, my assistant just booked the weekend because it was a holiday weekend, so I worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then Tuesday started preparing for Hurricane Irma. You may notice that we're not in our normal set. Well, we don't have any power. So the fine folks at Avenue 5 International Realty in Naples, Florida are lending us their office. Broker Marcel Semplis is a very good friend of mine and Joe's.
Yes.
And he has taken us in as refugees, actually just at his office. Avenue 5 International Realty specializes in selling mid-range to luxury homes in Naples, Florida. Their customers are from all over the world, and their agents specialize in international type of, what do you call it?
Purchases, and they arrange transfer and sale of homes.
A lot of their agents speak different languages, all that kind of stuff. Really, really nice real estate office, and you can see it's beautiful here. Okay, on to the show. So Joe and I thought it would be a good idea to go over some of the questions that we receive on a regular basis in our Facebook group. Now, if you haven't joined our Facebook group, it's www.facebook.com/groups/understand photography. There you can ask questions, you can share photos. It's a very supportive and warm community. It's hard for Joe and I to answer questions via email. We get a lot of private messages, and it's like, here, just post it on the Facebook group. Plus, you get a lot of different people helping you that way as well. So some of the questions come up over and over again, so we thought we would go over some of those today. All right, you ready?
I'm ready. One note, though, you're going to hear a lot of background noise because we just had a hurricane. There's a lot of emergency vehicles. It's a main road right outside, so there's emergency vehicles going back and forth. There's Florida Power and Light trucks going back and forth, fighting to restore power. And them guys are doing a great job down here. It's amazing. So heads up and thank you to FPL guys.
Except for he has power at his house and I don't.
That's why I'm so happy. I got my power back at 4:30 yesterday. But my good friend Mike Fisher, who we talk about sometimes on the show, a block from me, he still has no power.
Yeah.
So, but you're going to hear some of the background noise today.
Good point. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's get to it.
All right, so one of the biggest things we get, or I shouldn't say biggest things, but often we hear about SD cards and CF cards, and give us a little overview of their memory cards, right?
Yeah.
That's where your memory is stored. And what does that mean? Go over a little.
Okay.
Give us a little overview.
When you're recording, whether you're taking a picture or you're taking a video or whatever, you need to store, like we used to have videotape, and before that we had film. So you're recording it electronically as ones and zeros on electronic format. And the SD card or the CF card is just the same idea as the hard drive in your computer. It's a place to store the information temporarily until you can download it somewhere else.
Okay. What is the difference between an SD card and a CF card?
One's bigger than the other.
And why would you buy one?
You wanted me to say more.
Smart Alec. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, CF cards are a little older style. There were CF cards originally before there was SD, and they were the choice of the professionals. Professional cameras all started out with CF cards. Then they developed the SD card, which is smaller, much more compact, but they had issues there. They were never as fast as the CF cards, and they couldn't store as much. But things change and progress has happened, and CF cards have pretty much reached their limit now in storage and speed. And as a matter of fact, the CF consortium is going to a new format. Actually, they have two new formats, and they're fighting it out like the old Beta and VHS to see which one is going to come. In the meantime, the SD cards are fast or faster now than the CF cards, and they're very reliable. I hate to say it, but I've washed and dried a couple in a pants pocket, and they still work fine.
Oh, wow.
I wouldn't recommend that as a daily thing, but they're not fragile. The only thing I don't like about them is they're so tiny.
Well, in a way it's nice, but the biggest thing is, I mean, for our viewers, that might be a little more technical than they need to know.
Okay.
Basically, whatever your camera accepts is what you need.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if your camera has an SD slot, you need an SD card. If your camera has a CF slot, you need a CF. Now I have different, of course, I've got all different kinds of cameras, so I have everything. So it's funny though, my first CF card, my first digital camera I bought in 2001, and I bought a 256 megabyte compact flash card, CF card, and it was $150. Wow. They've gotten a lot cheaper. Now, somebody asked about using them as storage because they have become so much cheaper, the SD cards.
Well, there's no reason why you can't. The technology in there is the same as in these new solid-state drives. So I guess you could, but you're only storing a finite number on there. That isn't really their design.
Yeah,
but I don't see a
plus
technical reason why not. Backing up for just a second, something did occur to me in the SD cards. There's different types now. There's SD, and then there's SDHC and SDXHC and all that.
What does SD stand for? I forgot. You forget too.
Yeah.
Oh well, whatever. It's not that important.
I'm not sure.
Okay, SDHC.
Well, they're not backwards compatible because they use different file formats.
Okay.
So if you have a camera, an older camera that was designed for, let's say, an SD card, you can't use an SDHC card in it.
Can you use, if you have a new camera, can you use
can use anything in it.
Okay.
Yeah, you can use the older ones in the new one, but not the new ones in the older. So you have to stick to whatever type SD, SDHC, all that. But the speed rating you can change around, but you got to watch that you don't wind up with the wrong one in there.
All right, now what does that mean, speed rating?
There's two things going on there. Information is written to the card, okay, by your camera. That's the write speed. And then information is read by the card to your computer or video, whatever you're doing to actually see it. They play sneaky here because all the information you see for the most part is the read speed, which is not the important speed.
Oh.
Okay, so the write speed is usually much slower. Now with the newer SD cards, they have a write speed on there too. That's that little letter U with a number inside it, like a U and a 1.
What number should you get?
Higher the better. There's U1 and there's U2 and there's U3 right now.
So U3 would be the best
The fastest, yeah.
So if you're recording video, actually we're using an SD card in a video camera for this show, which is
and that's a U1 card because we're recording regular HD video, not 4K or something like that. Basically, whatever speed your camera recommends, that's all you need. Because
But how would you know that?
It's in your manual.
Oh, man, who wants to look at the manual?
Well, you can always write it on our group and ask, and somebody will look it up for you.
Well, wouldn't it be better just to get the fast cards?
Yeah, you're just
Now, what
wasting
is
money, though. It's
because I knew the class 10 was what they said I needed for video. What does that mean?
that's
You know?
lower than a U1.
Okay, so U1 is a newer technology.
Yeah.
Ah, I
Yeah.
see. Okay.
They went up to 10 with that, and then U1's above that, and so forth.
Now, what's your opinion on having huge cards?
Well, if we're talking still pictures, for stills, I use 32s.
32 gigabyte.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think you use a combination.
I use 32 and 16.
Yeah. First off, it depends on how big are the pictures you're recording. You know, what are we looking at here? Are we looking at a camera with 18 megabytes, or are we looking at something with 50 megabytes?
Good point.
My cards, my 32s, will hold around 1,000 pictures. That's raw files,
Okay.
which is
A
plenty.
lot. Yeah, well, you
Yeah.
have professional level cameras.
Right. You know, I would rather not be changing cards in the middle of a shoot.
What about, though, you know, most of our customers are not professional photographers, and they are going on a trip for 3 weeks. My personal opinion is a bad idea to use one card.
Well, all your eggs are in one basket.
Exactly, because you never know what could happen to it.
That's true, but you know, it's been a long time since I've had a memory card fail. And when that's happened, it's given me warning, because I'll have 1 or 2 pictures on it that are corrupt or funky looking. And that's when I know it's time to get
See,
rid of
now
it.
I've had the opposite. I've had many fail.
Okay. Stop
just
buying
says
cheap
no-
cards, Peggy Farron.
It just says no card in camera, and it can't
Oh,
read it.
okay, that's a
and it can't
total
read it
fail.
on
Yeah.
the reader. It can't
Yeah,
read it.
yeah.
That happens. That's happened to me. I bet 5 times this year.
Really? Wow.
Now, thank God I always back everything up, because I don't know how they go corrupt, because they go corrupt in my drawer. You know, I go back to
Yeah.
use them again. They worked fine, and then I go back to use them again, and the camera can't read it.
It's just the electronics and they're going. You know,
So
there's
that's why I don't like to use big cards.
Yeah.
I want to have,
A lot
and
of
I don't
small
ever
ones.
want to store it on a SD card. I
Yeah.
want to back it up on my computer, and then I still back everything up on a disc, on a DVD, not the raw files, because that
Yeah.
would take too many DVDs. But you know, once the job is edited or whatever, I put them. So I have a hard drive and a DVD backup, and you do double backups on
Yeah,
two
the
hard
DVD
drives, right?
is you know, there's no electronics on the DVD to go bad. You know, as long as the writable media over time will degenerate.
Right.
But as long as you have the disc, you know, you don't have to worry about it. Where the SD card or a CF card, there's electronics in there that are reading off and on. If that electronic
Yeah, 'cause
fails,
I don't know why
you
mine
can't get
fail
anything
when
off
I'm not
it.
even using them.
Yeah.
So, interesting. Yeah, that backup was a big conversation in the Facebook group, wasn't it? How
Oh,
to
yeah.
back up. Everybody has a different opinion. Everybody has a different way. But what everybody agrees on is you should have 2 backups.
Yeah, yeah. After this hurricane, I never was crazy about backup in the cloud, because it's slow, and if you have a large number of files, it's clunky. But after the hurricane, where you have such a wide swath, even if, like, I'm keeping one drive at the studio and another at my house, which is 30 miles apart, well, for something like Irma, 30 miles was nothing. So I could lose both. So I think what I'm going to start to do is take my important photos, you know, the ones that are really key photos that I've worked on, and store the TIFFs of them in the cloud somewhere.
Well, something I have not done, but Amazon Prime. You're an Amazon
Yeah.
Prime member?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have free storage up with no limit.
Really? I
That's
didn't
what
know
it
that.
said.
I didn't know that.
And so I was, I'm going to start uploading, but of course, have I done that? No.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many things to choose. I mean, a Dropbox, of course, we use it a lot. There's the cloud service you get when you're an Adobe CC customer.
Oh, I didn't know about that
Yeah,
one.
You have Adobe.
How do you get to it?
It's right there in your You know, the little Adobe CC thing that comes up. There's
Oh, that
thing
little
there.
window?
Yeah, and then you can get to it from there. I've never used it, but I mean, you have that there, and there's a lot of stuff around to.
We ought to
back
do.
up.
You know what? We ought to. That's the project for us. Is
There
we'll
we
go
go.
and experiment because we both have Dropbox, we
Yeah.
both have Amazon, we both have
Right.
Adobe. We ought
There's
to
a couple
see which
other
one,
ones,
like
and-
faster
Yeah.
uploads or
Yeah.
whatever.
And some of them, like, what is it, Carbonite, I think, like if you have a whole bunch and you have a disaster like we did here, they'll ship you a hard drive with everything on it, so you're not downloading forever.
Really?
Yeah, I think they're the one that does it, but don't quote me on it, but there's a couple of those services, if you have a massive failure, or obviously it'd take you a month to download everything, they send you a hard drive, you dump it, and then you send the hard drive back to them.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, I had Carbonite, but I didn't like it because my entire computer slowed down all the time because it was
Yeah.
always trying to upload. And of course, you know, we're talking about huge raw files, and I'm a
exactly.
professional photographer with a busy studio, so it was too much. Okay, so moving on. What about tripods? So okay, now I went to Italy. I just got back, although it feels like 100 years ago since I've been through a hurricane and another trip to be a refugee. But anyway, I hired a professional photographer to take me on a photo tour of Tuscany area. And he was like, "Oh, you don't need a tripod." And I never used it. I lugged that tripod around Italy. I never used it. Oh, and I know that you don't agree with that.
No, because, you know, especially if all you're doing is getting grab shots to post on Instagram and all that, that's fine. You know, if you're not going to use a tripod, you have to have a fairly fast shutter speed.
Which it was really bright outside.
Yeah, well, that's fine. If it's bright outside.
But I bumped up the ISO a little
you had
bit.
to see. Well, there's where
To 400 though.
Yeah,
That's
well,
not
there's where you
bad.
start though. If you're looking, say, a landscape and you want to hang it in your living room or you want to sell it, you want maximum quality. So you want the very lowest ISO, native ISO, so 100 usually. So you want that. You want maximum depth of field. So you're probably shooting at f11 or something like that to get the depth of field you want. So now we're looking at what kind of light do we have, you know, and if you don't have the light for that, you know, your shutter speed's starting to go down on you. Your shutter speed gets too slow, then you're.
But I mean, the shutter speed. Now, but the difference between ISO 100 and ISO 400, 2 stops, right? 2 stops of light. Do you really think the quality is that different?
In a modern camera, no, there's a difference. If you blow it up enough, you'll see it. But in a modern camera, and anything that's been made in the last couple of years, there isn't a whole lot of difference between 100, 200, and 400. It's subtle, but it's there.
So my shutter, I was at f8, I believe, most of the time, and my shutter speed was fast, like 500,000, more than 1,000. I mean,
You
it was
know,
bright outside, even
yeah.
though it was sunset time, you know, or like an hour. Well, we started a few hours before sunset, I guess 3 hours, 2.5 hours
Yeah.
before sunset.
Well, if you're
It
shooting
was
that
bright.
high, probably
However,
not. Yeah.
I brought the wrong lens because everybody said, "Oh, landscapes, you need a wide lens." Well, Tuscany is better with a long lens, so you can compress the photo.
Like the Palouse, same thing.
Yeah, you just went to the Palouse this summer.
Yeah.
So if I would have had a longer lens, I would have wanted a much faster shutter speed. But I still, even if, let's say I had a 300 millimeter lens, if my shutter speed's 500, I'm still going to have pretty sharp pictures, aren't I?
You should, yeah. As long as you're using proper technique when you're holding the camera and everything
Hold
else.
the camera correctly. You know that's a
Yeah.
big stickler for both of us.
But-
Elbows in, left hand underneath like a shelf.
But another thing, non-technical side of using a tripod, it slows you down. It makes you think. You know, I'm going to set the tripod up, so I want to make sure I have it in the right spot. You're not just bing, bing, binging all over the place. You're not spraying and praying. You're developing a little more thought as to the placement, and you're being careful about, if I move it over this way a little bit, I'll have a little better, or I can get this tree here, or that kind of thing. So I think the fact that it slows you down some is a plus too.
And see, I have the exact opposite opinion on that. Of course, we never agree on anything. Anyway, my opinion is, oh man, I really want to get that tree in there, but God, what a pain in the butt it's going to be to change this tripod all around. It's so much easier if you're hand holding to change your composition. That's my opinion.
Well, you can move around more. It is the negative side of having it on the tripod is people tend to grow roots, and they just shoot from there. They may zoom in and zoom out, but they don't explore changing the perspective a little bit. So there's a negative side to it, though.
Well, now here's something we do agree on. What kind of tripod should I buy?
The best one you can afford.
Well, I want to spend like $100. You're going to say, no, that's not good enough, right?
I'm going to say handhold. I'm
Yeah.
going to say handhold. I mean, you're really...
And so why is this your opinion that you need an expensive tripod?
The cheap ones are flimsy. They're not stable. They actually vibrate, so they can actually blur your picture more than not using a tripod, because just the fact that the vibration from the shutter can start shaking the whole mechanism, or the wind blowing and everything else. So you need something of decent quality.
And are there specific brands that you recommend?
Well, you know, all the ones you did, we did a show on this, I think, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
I think we did a show on this.
Yeah, we'll have to look up. I don't know what the...
You can roll back and see what it is, but I favor flip-lock tripods, which limits me quite a bit on what I can get. Manfrotto has all that. Enduro has a lot of flip locks that are good. Most of the others just have twist locks.
And why do you prefer the flip locks? I know, but tell our audience.
I know when I have my flip lock flipped, the leg is solid. I've seen too many where people have used a twist lock, and then they'll go and they'll set the tripod up, and one of the legs will slowly collapse because it isn't quite tight enough. Or they got it so tight, now they have a hard time getting it loose. Where with the flip, it's either flipped on or it isn't. Assuming you've adjusted them properly. Over time, every once in a while, you've got to give them a little tighten. But it's not a big deal.
Plus, it's way faster with a flip lock.
I find it faster, yeah.
I mean, you're already slowed down with a tripod. So if you have to unscrew each leg having 3 or 4 screws, or would you call them screws? What do you call those?
Well, the twist locks.
The twist locks, yeah.
I find flips
pain in the butt.
Yeah. Now, some people say they're faster, though.
Really?
Yeah, I've had people use that argument on a lot of the websites and all. They'll say, "Oh, my twist locks are faster." So, I guess it's what you get used to, you know. And then the other thing they say is the flip lock will get hung up on brush and stuff like that, you know. Because it's got a little hook on it. They say it might get caught on a twig as they're hiking
your
through
finger. You could pinch your
through
finger.
the thing there. You could do that.
I've pinched my finger.
Yeah, I have too.
That hurts.
Yeah.
But the most so Manfrotto's one.
Gitzo is a good brand. Enduro is a good brand.
Really Right Stuff.
Really Right Stuff, of course, is high end.
But we're talking.
Pro Media Gear has some really nice tripods now they've just come out with.
And no, but we're talking $500+, right?
Not for the Manfrottos. The Manfrottos are kind of volume good stuff.
Okay.
So they're at the bottom end of the expensive stuff. So you can get a nice Manfrotto tripod for a couple $100.
I have a nice one that one of my customers bought me. I told you that. I'm still so touched. Thank you, Sandy Moran. And it was, I think, a couple $250. It's a really nice tripod, Manfrotto. Manfrotto.
Yeah, they have nice ones. I mean, there are other brands that have nice ones. So you want to look. You want to make sure it's comfortable for you. You want to make sure it's tall enough. Because you don't want to be extending the center column.
And why not?
Because as soon as you extend the center column, now you got a monopod. You got this pole that will vibrate. So the only time you extend the center column is if you really, really have to. But you don't want a tripod where you're going to be bent over all the time or it's going to kill your back. Okay. So you want one tall enough for you.
Okay. Okay, so let's move on. So what about camera care? How do you clean your cameras? What should you do? Give us some basic tips. I want to do a whole show on this, so don't go into too much detail.
I usually just put it in the dishwasher on a medium cycle. You remember that video I showed on one of my presentations where the guy had the camera and lens and he had the tub full of dish soap and he was dousing it and all. We have fun sometimes on our presentations. We do camera talks on our camera equipment and everything else at various photo clubs here in Florida. So if you're from a photo club and you'd like us to speak, contact us and we're happy to come out and give you a little talk on something. Back to what I was doing, I just threw a little commercial in there. You have all these commercials, I figured I'd put one in. So. First thing I'll do is wipe down the outside.
What do you wipe it with?
Usually it's sandy where we go. You know, we do a lot of beach here in Naples and Fort Myers. So the first thing is I'll take a painter's brush, a short bristle brush. Usually I get one from Lowe's or Home Depot.
And don't get a cheap one because those bristles fall out.
You want one of those cheap ones. Usually they're like an off-white color.
Okay.
And you want fairly short bristles so they're stiff.
Okay.
And then I'll brush all the crevices and everything else and kind of brush all the sand or debris out of it. I don't want to use an air blower because an air blower is going to blow the sand into the cracks.
Oh, believe me, I got in trouble for that because I don't know who taught me that, but I did. That's how I used to take care of my camera.
And that's what it's doing.
And then Isaac from Southern Photo Technical Service was like, "What? What are you doing?"
Yeah.
I was like, "I'm sorry."
So you want to brush it off with that. If there's something in there that's kind of stuck, you can use a rocket blower. Rocket blowers are nice.
Oh, the little
it's just a little
blower.
rubber bulb, and it looks like a little rocket ship with the thing.
Yeah, okay.
The trick is with them is they have a filter inside. Because, you know, every time you squeeze it and leave it, you squeeze it, it puffs up air. Then when you leave it go, it sucks more air in. So it's sucking in whatever the atmosphere is. So if there's dust or anything in the atmosphere, you're now going to blow it in. So there's a little tiny filter in there to kind of stop that.
Oh, that's cool.
That's the difference between something like a rocket and the cheapies that you buy for 99 cents.
Okay.
You know, or a turkey-based.
Is Rocket a brand name?
Rocket's a brand name.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
or it's the description of that particular thing. I don't know who the manufacturer is, but it's called a rocket blower, and it comes in 3 different sizes. I use the medium. It's small enough for my bag. The big one is like Isaac uses the big one when he's cleaning at the studio.
Okay.
But I'll blow it off with that, and then I'll take a damp cloth and just wipe off the outside with a damp cloth.
What kind of damp cloth? Like any kind of cloth?
Yeah, just I'll usually use a microfiber cloth.
So that, because don't you, like if you use cotton, won't the little residue get on it, or that?
Well,
it's not a big enough
I like the
deal?
microfiber because the fibers are so close together that grit can't get trapped in it and then be abrasive.
Okay.
That microfiber is almost like a hard surface as far as being able to get grit in it.
Okay.
So I'll just dampen it slightly and I'll just wipe it off with that, and that's how I'll do the external part of it.
Now, what about your? Okay, so that's to clean your camera up.
Or lens, externals.
Right.
Except the glass.
What about the glass?
All right, well, the glass, again, the first thing I'll do is, I like the lens pens.
Okay.
Okay, and they have one end which is
and that
a little,
is actually called a lens pen.
Lens pen is a brand name.
You can get it on Amazon
it's a
or
registered
B&H.
trademark.
Hunt's
lens
Photo
pen.
and Video.
Yeah. And they have the regular size is what you use the camera, and then they have specialty ones for cleaning sensors and the little viewfinder in the back and all kinds of stuff. But the regular one is what you want. And the one end is a little brush, fine brush, and I'll use that to wipe off any debris on the lens. That's number one. I'm going to try and brush stuff off. Use a rocket blower if I have to, because you want to get all the debris off. Maybe that's all you need. Then if it's got a smudge from a finger or something, I'll use a microfiber cloth. And I'll try to clean it with a microfiber cloth. If one pass of the microfiber won't take it off, I'll give it and breathe on it a little bit. Got a little bit of moisture, now I have a little bit of moisture on there, and I'll clean it with that.
Okay.
And that's usually as far as you have to go. Now if it's real oily, that's where I'll use the other end of the lens pen. The other end of the lens pen has a little pad on it that's covered with carbon.
It looks like a magic marker kind of.
Yeah, it's got carbon on it, and it's flat, and as you wipe it with that, it's going to absorb any oil or anything like that in there, and that should take that off. And then when you put the lens pen back together and you put the cap on and screw the cap in, it puts more carbon on it.
Oh, okay.
and you know you need a new lens pen, you look at that little triangle and you start to see the plastic edges, you know it's worn down, so throw it away.
Okay. And they're not expensive, right?
$7-8, I think,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
You see them all different prices.
So that should be in your camera kit.
Any camera store is going to carry them. You know, but I like that brand. You got to watch if you get these $2 cheapies off of eBay. There's really no carbon in there, and it's kind of wacky. Okay. Now, if that doesn't clean it, and they're really dirty, so you got a real problem there. From there, I'll use isopropyl alcohol.
Okay.
At least 70 or 80%. But now we're getting serious, and this is maybe at this point you think about sending it to somebody like Isaac or Canon or Nikon or something like that. But when you use the isopropyl alcohol, that's why you use a really high percentage, because the high percentage evaporates real quickly before it goes and runs down into the electronics in your lens. Remember, the lens has electronics in it these days.
Is that just like regular rubbing alcohol?
It's isopropyl alcohol. You buy it at any of the CVS or Walgreens
so how
or
do you,
anything.
it just says on there
it says
70%
or 80% or something like that. And you just get the little bottle of it. And you just use that, put a little bit on the cloth, and then wipe it with that.
Okay. Okay.
But make sure you've cleaned it of anything else so you're not scratching it.
But I think if you still see like specks and you've cleaned your lens, probably your sensor is dirty.
Yes.
And I know my recommendation is not to clean your own sensor unless you are a really technical person. Because I try, everybody's like, oh, it's easy, and I tried. I broke the mirror. And then Isaac does come here to Naples, as does Isaac with Southern Photo Technical Service will come to Naples. He's coming November 4th, 2017. If you want to get your camera cleaned here. Also, Peachtree Camera Repair comes down from Atlanta here to Naples to clean sensors. It's much smarter to get it cleaned professionally. They also calibrate the lenses, is that what they do? Because now, because of all the new electronics, each lens needs to be calibrated for each camera, which was something we didn't do in the olden days, back in the olden days. Right? So.
Oh, I forgot to mention to you, I got the thing to not calibrate the signal lens, but to update the firmware and modify it. You can customize it. So I found a good deal on one at KEH, a used one. So I got it. So we'll check and make sure your lenses are updated too, the new signal lenses. Yeah. Okay.
Although I think last time Peachtree was here, they did it. But, okay, so let's see what else is on our list of things in here. I'm going to skip around because we're talkative people.
We yammer right along.
I am going to ask you why are my pictures over or underexposed? So let's talk about that, and then we're going to talk about the next question.
You take a photo, and I'm assuming you're in some kind of automatic mode when you do this. Or maybe you're in manual mode and you've zeroed the needle. So what you're getting is what the camera thinks is the perfect exposure. Now the camera isn't very bright. The meter in there assumes that if it takes everything it's looking at and kind of mushes it together, it'll wind up with a medium shade of gray, what we call 18% gray.
Okay.
And by golly, it's going to get that. So if you have something white, like if you're taking out in the snow, and you take it, it'll wind up looking gray, because the camera has assumed the snow was gray and given you an exposure to make it gray.
All right, and the reason it does that is because if you have a snowy scene but there's a lot of houses in it or something, you'll probably get a good picture.
Yeah.
But if you have mostly a snowy scene, right? Go ahead.
Yeah. So the camera is suggesting the exposure, making the exposure based on trying to make the scene an average tonality.
So if you have a lot of white, it's looking at the whole scene saying...
It's going to make it too dark. If you have a lot of black, it's going to make it too bright.
Okay.
If it's an average scene, it's going to come out great.
Probably going to be okay.
Yeah. So that's why. So at that point...
Now,
you have to make an adjustment yourself.
Okay, but let me back up.
Okay.
That's if you're using evaluative or matrix metering. Am I correct there?
Yes. Well, it's going to happen with any metering mode, because if you're using evaluative or matrix, it's looking at the whole scene, and it's probably compensating a little bit. If you're using center weighted, it's looking mostly at the middle of the scene, and if you're using spot, it's looking at a spot. But it's going to give you the meter reading on whatever that spot is, or the center weighted part of the whole thing.
So if the spot is white, or if the center weight is white, okay.
So,
all right, so go ahead.
So a lot of pros use spot metering, but they also have a pretty good idea what the kind of thing they're going to get back from the scene. Like,
well,
I know, just for a rough thing, grass gives you roughly an 18% gray.
Ah.
When we go down to the beach, we do our beach photography a lot, and when I'm taking a group down there, and I've taught them to shoot on manual, and I say, okay, we're going to get an initial reading, so we're right on there when we get down to the birds. So as we pass through the sea grape, I have them meter on the sea grape under the same light that the birds will be under, and they have a ballpark place to start.
Okay.
So. But that's the thing there. The camera's not real smart, so then you have to compensate somewhat.
Now, how do you compensate?
Well, if you're on an automatic mode, you have EV compensation on the camera.
EV stands for?
Exposure value.
Okay.
Okay. So
and how do you do that?
Well, whatever depends on the camera, but usually there's a button you push, and then you could turn a wheel, and that will give you minus. It'll change it to minus or plus, and usually you can go 3 stops on either side.
All right, so explain that again, because I bet you a lot of people didn't understand that.
So you have your camera, and you're in an automatic mode, whether it's program, AV, or TV, or S, and your picture's too dark or too light. So wherever that control is to change the exposure compensation, you would dial minus if you want it darker, or plus if you want it brighter.
Okay, so let's go back to the snow. So I take a picture of snow, and I look at the back of the camera, and it's way too dark. So then I go to the dial, the EV dial, or button. Usually it's a button, and then you turn a dial. You hold the button and turn the dial. And I say, okay, this is too dark, I'm going to turn the EV to +1.
Plus, brighten it up, yeah.
+1, because I'm going to try one stop. I'm going to take another picture. If it's still not bright enough, then I'll go to +2.
Right.
If it's still not bright enough, go to +3. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're doing it that way just to get yourself in the ballpark.
Now, what about if you shoot in manual?
Well, if you're shooting manual, you're doing the override yourself. Instead of having the needle on 0, you would adjust your aperture or shutter or ISO to get the needle on +1 or +2.
Now, when you say the needle, you're talking about the meter inside your viewfinder?
There's some kind of meter in the viewfinder that has a 0 point when you have proper exposure. It's either lines of dots going one way or the other, or actual little fake needle or something like that, and you're moving that, so instead of being on 0, in this case we'd have it on +1 or 1 1/3 or 2 or whatever it happens to be. So we're going to adjust it ourselves.
For me, it's easier to shoot in manual.
Yeah, because I can adjust that. The problem with the automatic modes, remember, it's reading the whole scene. So if the next picture I'm a little lower and I have a little less sky or a little more sky, it's going to give me a different reading. So now the compensation I did before isn't right, so I'm chasing it. Where with the manual mode, all I'm doing is I don't have to look at I don't even have to look at the needle. I look at it, it's too dark, so I open up my shutter or my aperture by 1 stop. I can just do that without even looking and take the shot, and I know I'm going to get the same thing.
So I'm going to give a commercial. Because honest to God, it is so much easier to shoot in the manual mode than it is to shoot in aperture priority or shutter priority. There's nothing wrong with aperture priority. There's nothing wrong with shutter priority, but you need to understand what you're doing. So you need to really first learn how to shoot and be comfortable with shooting in manual. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the very first class of the 4 Weeks to Proficiency in Photography, in 2 hours, we have you shooting in manual, and then we give you homework. Every day you have homework so that you really understand how to shoot in manual, and then we build on it for the rest of the class. Now, after you take the class, go ahead, go back to aperture priority. But if you're in a situation like this, where you're having to use exposure compensation and all this other stuff, it's way easier. Just put your dial to M for manual, shoot in manual. You'll be so much happier, Mike.
Absolutely.
You agree with me?
Yeah.
October 5th.
Yeah.
And I actually, understandphotography.com is our main website. But if you want to go directly to our school, our online school,
Yeah.
I guess you would call it, it's onlinephotoworkshops.com. Okay. All right. So I have another question. In the film days,
Before my time.
things have changed from now in the digital, because is it better to overexpose or underexpose if you have to do one or the other? And why would I have to do one or the other in the first place?
Well, when you expose a picture, and we're talking whether it was film or digital now, you're trying to get the most information you can. You're trying to get a good-looking picture. If you're in the old days when we were shooting slide film, you had to be right on. You had to nail it because you couldn't do anything with it. We had film, you had a little more latitude. With digital, if you're shooting JPEG, it's more like shooting slide film, because you're throwing away information that's not being used there, so you have what you have. Where with RAW, you have a little more latitude. So when we're shooting, so usually you try for the best exposure you can. You're going to look at your histogram. The histograms are the best thing about digital, is the fact that you can look at this histogram, and once you've learned a little bit about it, and you can through your course, and of course a lot of other places, some of our talks are about that too. But once you look at the histogram, you can make an informed decision on whether you have a good photo, whether you captured the highlights, and whether you've captured the shadows, and where you have it. So for JPEG, that's really important, because that's your final product. So when we're shooting JPEGs, we expose pretty much what the meter says. Mm-hmm. When we shoot RAW, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us overexpose slightly. Technically, we're not overexposing. We're exposing bright to the point just before we blow anything out.
Okay.
So we haven't overexposed, but we're getting it the whole scene as bright as we can without blowing out any highlights. When I say blow out, I mean a part that is so bright that I've lost all the detail in it. A wedding dress where you can't see anything, it's a white blob, or a bird that's a white blob. Mm-hmm. When I do that, and the picture is going to look too bright when you look at it, but I have more detail in the shadows, because I pulled it up and now I have more detail in the shadows. So now when I process it, I can darken it a little bit, or just darken the highlights, and still have all this shadow detail.
And how do you know?
I look at the histogram.
And how do you know? By looking at the histogram?
When I look at the histogram, I'm looking at the right-hand wall of the histogram,
okay,
and looking to see if anything is if that curve is climbing the right-hand wall. So that's one way.
So
if
anything's climbing up the wall, that means it's completely overexposed.
Right.
So that's the big thing you want to watch out for, right?
Yeah. When we say, we call it ETTR, exposed to the right. And we're talking about exposing it so the histogram is all the way to the right without climbing the wall.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And
What was the
we
second
want.
way?
The blinkies, what we call the blinkies.
Okay.
Highlight warning or overexposure warning or whatever. You turn that on your camera.
And how do you do that?
It's in your menu. You would turn that on. Okay. In a mirrorless camera, they also have what they call the zebras, which is essentially the same thing. There'll be these blinking parts of the image, which can be highly annoying when you're taking the photo.
Yeah. But
they'll tell you the spots of the image that are going to be blown out. Okay, and that's very useful information.
So as soon as you, well, if you're using live view, will you see the blinkies before you take the picture?
No. With a DSLR, you will not see the blinkies until after the fact.
All right, so
with a
you take the
mirrorless
picture.
camera, you can see the zebras before you take the picture.
All right, so you take the picture, and then the little parts that are overexposed are just going to
be
blink
blinking
at you.
off and on, yeah.
And you leave yours on all the time, right?
Yes.
It's just so annoying to me. I don't leave it on. Because I overexpose things on purpose sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, if I have a, well, you know, I still do weddings, right?
Right.
So we shoot into the sun at the Gulf of Mexico. You know, most weddings are an hour, hour and a half before sunset. So the sun is blasting us right in the face. And that's how we have to shoot the bride and groom.
Right.
So I overexpose the sky.
Yeah.
Because I need the people to come out.
Right.
They're way more important. Now, obviously, I also use flash on when I'm on my short camera. If I'm close enough, I'm using flash. But if I'm, like, my assistant's going to be way in the back of the, you know, the chairs, she's going to have to overexpose the background.
Exactly.
So that's why I don't use the blinky thing, because it drives me crazy.
Oh, it's a different technique. Now, see, I shoot a lot of wildlife. And here in Florida, we have a lot of white birds. And white birds are a very difficult subject. And sometimes you can blow out some of the back feathers, and it's hard to see that on the histogram because it's only coming up a tiny bit. Where with the blinky, I can see if I got that little bit of blink on the back of the bird, I know I still need to come down maybe another third of a stop or something like that.
Now, with white bird photography, you tend to underexpose just in general, right?
Well, you are to get the white bird to not blow out. You're still exposing to the right, but you wind up with a very dark scene. You're exposing so your histogram is just touching the right-hand wall. And since you're trying to get the detail in the bird is not pure white, it's kind of grayish a little bit, so everything's really dark in the photo. But in that case there, we're not concerned with shadow detail. We're trying to capture the white egret or whatever, snowy egret, so we want the feather detail on that. We don't care how dark the sea grape or mangroves are in back of it, so they're dark, we don't care.
So now if you're a bird photographer and you don't want to shoot in manual, what's your advice there?
There again, you're going to have to dial in a lot of exposure compensation.
Because I know...
you're going to be playing with the exposure compensation quite a bit.
Right, so you probably should dial at least... If you're shooting mostly white birds, you should be probably at least at -1 on your exposure compensation?
Probably, yeah. Depends again, are you matrix or you spot metering or whatever, you know. If you're spot metering, certainly you're going to be a -1 or -1 1/3 or something like that.
Okay.
If you're spot metering on the bird, yes.
Is spot metering better for birds?
Well, it's going to be more consistent. I mean, you have a white bird in a dark background and you have matrix metering, it's going to fail. It just doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Center weight it will help as long as your
bird's in the center.
Bird's in the middle, yeah. And typically when you're shooting birds, you know, we always do, the thing everybody tells you is, you know, you want to focus on the eye. And that sounds great in theory until you actually try to do it.
I don't know how they do it.
I mean, it's one of these myths, you know, oh, focus on the eye. Yeah, right, okay? If you can, you try and get the neck because it's big enough, you know.
Yeah.
What they're really saying is don't focus on the wing, because the wingtip's going to throw you right off. Okay, so they focus on the eye. Typically, you're not that close, and you're just trying to get it on the bird in general.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So I mean, a lot of things like that. And I lost track of what the original thing was.
Spot metering.
Okay, the spot metering. So you're metering on the bird. You know, you're trying to, but
it's better. Spot metering is better.
Yeah, as long as you can keep the spot on the bird. Yeah.
I always use spot metering, almost always. I find it
But you're
more.
using manual, see?
Yeah.
Okay,
so
we're talking spot metering with an automatic mode, and as soon as that spot would shift off the bird, your exposure
But if you're always focusing on the bird,
you should be okay, yes.
You should be okay,
yeah.
right? Actually, you even have a picture of a flying bird in our metering part of the 4 weeks to proficiency class.
And that was done on manual, though, you know.
Right, but if you were in an automatic mode, okay, let me explain the picture to everybody. It's a seagull flying, and Joe took a vertical picture with the seagull at the bottom right of the picture, and above it there's a little bit of blue sky, but there's mostly a big white cloud.
Yeah.
So because you were, and it wouldn't have mattered if you were in any automatic or manual, because you were in spot metering and you focused on the bird, the camera metered on the bird,
Right.
the bird came out great.
Yeah.
If you had been in evaluative or matrix metering, the bird would have been a silhouette.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Because it would have taken into account the whole picture, the white cloud, and then that bird would be
Yeah.
a silhouette. So spot metering is usually better. In most cases,
Usually,
not all.
yeah.
Right? Okay.
Usually, for that, I would either that for the birds. If I'm not using spot and I'm going to use it in an automatic mode, which I rarely do, I might think about center weighted. Might think about it. You know?
Okay. All right, here's a question. Batteries. Let's talk about batteries. Now, I can't remember who turned me on to those Eneloop batteries. Eneloop.
Right.
By the way, we're going to have links to everything in the show notes. So now, please note, who knows when we're going to get the show notes done, because we are in a little bit of a flux here after Hurricane Irma, with very few of us have power yet, so hopefully it won't take too long. But actually, though, this is a recorded show, so
Yeah.
hopefully we'll be on top of things. Anyway, Eneloop batteries, the thing that I like about them is they hold a charge. So like before the hurricane, I charged every battery I had.
Yeah.
I even found like a bunch of old batteries, and I charged them all, and they're all still, what, eight
Yeah,
days
yeah.
later, they're still
Yeah.
good. They're still almost fully charged.
Their latest ones now, I think they're on generation 4 now, 3 or 4. And the latest ones will hold over 80% of a charge for 18 months, I think it is, something like that. It's
Wow.
a year or 18 months. It's crazy how long they'll hold the charge for.
That's
You know?
amazing.
And a regular NIM nickel metal hydride battery, I mean, they go down after, a month.
Now that's if you don't use them, though. When you're
Yeah.
using them, you're using them
Yeah,
up.
you're using them, they're using them. But they're really good. Sanyo developed them.
Yeah.
And then they sold to Panasonic. So Panasonic makes them, and I think Fuji has the right to make them too.
Okay.
But it's great, and there's other technology now that's similar, but they're great because they give you a long life. And typical photographer doesn't use a flash every day like you do. They put the batteries in the flash, and 2 months later you want to use the flash, and the batteries are dead. But Eneloops, the batteries are going to be fresh, so they're real handy for that. I love them.
Although, I highly recommend to not leave your batteries in your flash. I'm looking at the screen. I forgot.
Yeah.
I'm used to having 3 cameras.
Sorry about that. The other 2
only
cameras
one
are still
camera.
over the studio, so we got a single camera. Although we got really these classy chairs and everything
I know,
else.
it's a nice
we got
place here at
we got
Avenue
we
5.
got the Eiffel Tower in the back there. I mean, this is great.
But anyway, I recommend don't leave your batteries inside your flash, because we've had people that they corrupted in there.
Well, the regular batteries do that, but most of the rechargeables won't.
Okay.
Or not as quickly.
But still, isn't it still better
it's
just to
better
keep
off
it out?
taking them out. Why risk corrosion? you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I've lost more than one thing because I've forgotten left the batteries in.
Anyway, what else do you want to say about batteries? 'Cause batteries is always a big
but
topic.
That's your double A's or your triple A's. But what most people ask about is the battery that's in their camera. They're all different, and they're all very expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, and these days they're not just the battery; they have electronics in them. Like the ones in my Canon camera, they keep track of how many times they've been charged and whether they're getting a full use out of them.
No kidding.
They're telling me how many shots I've left on the battery, all kinds of stuff.
Where does it tell you that? How do you find that out?
When you go to your camera menu and you look at the battery performance, it gives you all that information back there.
So in the menu, it says battery.
We go to battery, and then
it'll
gives you all this information.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it gives you all kinds of stuff, and that's why these batteries are $80 and $90 a piece. It's just crazy. There are third-party batteries you can buy,
Off-brand.
off-brand, OEM or whatever, third-party manufacturers, and there's 2 tiers. Or there's 3 tiers actually. The very worst are the counterfeit ones that you see on eBay.
Okay.
That are a Canon battery, a Nikon battery, or whoever, a Sony battery, but aren't really. They're counterfeit.
But they're saying Canon.
And they have the fake Canon thing and all that. They're the absolute worst.
How do you know?
Well, if it's $10 and it's a Canon battery on eBay or whatever,
Probably.
you know, you'd have with any battery that you're buying off-brand or something like that. Be aware of who you're buying it from. If you're buying a battery that's a manufacturer battery, any of the manufacturers, Canon, Nikon, Sony, Panasonic, Olympus, buy it from the camera store. So buy it from
Hunt's Photo Video.
Buy it from Hunt's. Buy it from B&H. Buy it from your local camera store
Johnson
if you have
Photo
one.
Imaging.
Johnson Photo
They're right
Imaging,
here in
JPI right
Bradenton.
here. Buy it from the local store, because that way you know you're not getting a counterfeit battery, and there are a lot of them around there.
Okay.
Okay. So then you have copies that are made. And it's a business, and they're a reputable business, and they make it under their own brand name, and they warrant their product and everything else.
Like Power to Go, I think, is one.
Wasabi is one I like. Sterling Tech is another one. I use mostly Wasabis these days.
Wasabi, like the spicy.
WSAIBI, I think. Oh no, that's got a Canon battery in it. But the Wasabis, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it right, but they're good. They're very reliable. They're very reasonably priced. They have back-engineered the electronics, so they give the same reporting in your camera that the manufacturers does. The cheaper ones don't. They're dumb batteries, so they don't tell you all that information. Where the better ones, they've been backwards engineered, so they do give you they'll give you all that information in there. They're very reliable, top quality stuff. They usually use Japanese cells, and they're warranted.
Okay.
Okay.
What about, do they last as long, or?
I've had them last slightly less, and I've had them last quite a bit longer than the
And what's the
batteries.
price difference?
A third.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, how long do batteries last? Because I still have my original digital camera. I bought a Canon 10D in 2001. I think it was 2001. Anyway, the batteries, I've replaced the batteries many times because they only last like 10 minutes after a long time. And of course, then I was like, I tried to use nail polish, but that wears off, Like, how do I keep track of which ones are old and which ones are new? How long does a battery last? Or I guess it depends on how much you use it.
Well, it depends.
And here's another question. Should I keep them charged all the time? Should I let them blow out? What do they call that when you let the battery go out all the way till dead?
Well, you should never let them discharge completely.
Never, okay.
That'll destroy the battery.
Oh, okay.
That's why most of your cameras have circuits in there that sense when the battery's getting near depletion and shut it off. Because if the battery goes to zero, it reverses and is ruined.
Okay.
So there's
when
electronics.
after a job or whatever, using my camera, I should go and plug it in every time.
No.
Okay, go ahead.
The battery manufacturers recommend that you keep them at about a 60-70% charge for long-term storage.
What about for like a week?
Then charge them up.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right, you know what? We're going to have a part 2 to this because we have so many more questions left, and we need to record another show.
Okay.
And our guest may or may not make it because of the hurricane. So we need to record a lot of shows today.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us about now you're the president of the Florida Camera Club Council, which is, we talked about. You have a conference coming up in March.
We have a conference coming up March 9th, 10th, and 11th.
2018.
2018, yeah. Because this video will be on YouTube forever and ever, I guess. So this will be 2018. We had a very successful conference last year. We had 14 or 15 major name speakers over the 3-day period. We also had workshops and everything else. We're repeating the same thing again. We have some fantastic speakers lined up. For keynote speakers, we had such a plethora of speakers that were so good, we couldn't decide on a single keynote speaker, so we wound up having 2 keynote speakers.
And one of them is Parrish Kohanam.
I am very excited about it. Parrish Kohanam is one of them. If you've never heard Parrish speak, he's tremendous. He's very informative. I've been to a couple of his things, and I've talked to the man. Tremendous information.
He's a Canon Explorer
He's a
of Light.
Canon Explorer of Light, which means
huge
he's
honor.
a huge honor, and that means you are the best of the best to get that. Or the Nikon has a similar program, and
Nice.
those guys are pretty good too, but not as good as Canon guys. But we might get cancellations from the Nikon guys on the conference after they say that, so maybe I'll reverse that. But Parrish is tremendous. The second speaker I'm very excited about too. He was at our show last year, and he filled the room every time he did something. And this is Max's Gammas. He's probably not as known nationally because he's more of a local photographer down here in Florida. Tremendous wildlife guy. He's a good speaker. He knows what your issues are because he's self-taught and he's gone that road himself and made the mistakes, and he'll tell you how not to make them yourself. Great guy to listen to. The problem we had with him at the last conference is we couldn't get him to clear the room for the next person coming on because nobody wanted to leave his presentations.
Wow.
They wanted to ask him more questions.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
and he's a wildlife photographer.
he's a wildlife photographer,
Okay.
and he's an excellent wildlife
So that
photographer.
is going to be on, it's f3c.org is the website. It's actually already on the website, isn't it?
Yes.
All the information?
Yeah, you can sign
And
up for tickets. We're selling tickets already.
And you have do you have an early registration price or?
I don't remember what it is offhand, but yes, it's up there now.
Okay,
Yeah.
so f3c.org. That is going to be in the show notes on understandphotography.com. We're going to put all the links to different things we talked about in today's show. And while you're there, remember, we have hundreds of articles in there. Our motto at Understand Photography is we simplify the technical, so read our articles. You'll really get a lot out of them, I promise. One more quick commercial. We have a new class, Lightroom class online at onlinephotoworkshops.com that's going to help you master the collections, catalogs, just getting, what did you say, clean up your mess.
Clean up your mess.
Because that, to me, is the hardest part about Lightroom, and Joe Fitzpatrick is so good at simplifying Lightroom, because Lightroom is hard in my opinion. Anyway, thank you so much for watching episode number 54 of the Understand Photography Show. Thank you, Joe Fitzpatrick.
Pleasure as usual.
And we will see you next week.